Hi, my name is Rotem, and I go by Ro, too. I'm the librarian of the Canada Comics Open Library. Thank you so much for joining us for our second Comics Out Loud. I'm going to say a few words and then hand it over to Lena. The event will run until around 8 p.m. and there'll be time for questions at the end, and you can ask them in the Q&A box. We will also be posting this event to our YouTube channel as well. This project couldn't have been possible without the support of the Ontario Arts Council through an arts grant. We're hoping this project can also be a resource to blind and visually impaired community members who often aren't able to access comics in collections, and that we can grow more blind comics resources as well. For those who haven't heard about our organization, CCAL was founded in 2018. We're a volunteer-run library and nonprofit organization focused on comics and their accessibility and showcasing how amazing they are. You can visit our website at canadacomicsol.org to view our projects, blog, and other online resources like the Canadian Cartoonist Database and aggregated list resources like comics and zine databases, podcasts, comics jams, and websites. And you can find us on Instagram and Twitter at Canada Comics OL and YouTube searching Canada Comics Open Library. I'll also read a land acknowledgement for our Toronto Library. Canada Comics Open Library would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation, the Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat, and that Indigenous peoples have lived on and cared for this land for more than 15,000 years. This territory is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Treaty. Today, Toronto is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that settlers on the land directly benefit from the process of colonization. Settlers and Canadian organizations have a lot of work to do, including our library. CCAL is currently focused on prioritizing Indigenous comics for our collection, showcasing Indigenous creators on our website and physical library space, making our cataloging system more inclusive of Indigenous communities through tagging and language, and making our space more accessible to Indigenous creators. Please do get in touch with us if you have suggestions towards any of these goals. I would also like to acknowledge that today I'm speaking from Victoria, BC, which is the traditional territory of the Lekwungen peoples, the Songhees, and the Esquimalt nations, and that I'm a settler on these lands. So now I'm going to introduce Lena and then hand the event over to her. Lena Wu is a multidisciplinary artist and illustrator based in Toronto. Her work grapples with self-perception, mythology, queer theory, diaspora, mental health, and adolescence. Her work has been published with Hand Eye Society, Loose Leaf Magazine, Half a Grapefruit, and others. Her art has been featured at galleries such as X-Space Cultural Center and Gallery 44, and she has held workshops with organizations including T-Base, Insomniac Film Festival, and Canada Comics Open Library. Lena is currently in her thesis year at OCAD-U studying illustration with a minor in English while working part-time in arts administration. She loves shoujo manga and is figuring out how to be soft and strong at the same time. So thank you, everyone, and thank you so much to Lena.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'm just gonna share my screen, so bear with me for a second. My computer is very old and slow. Okay. Cool. Okay, I think this is working. Yeah, so thank you again to Rotem, and thank you to the Canada Comics Open Library. It's always wonderful to work with you guys. And I'm a big fan of the work that you're doing. And also thank you to everyone who's joining me today. I'm really excited to read some comics and talk about comics with you guys. I'm just showing you these two images to set the vibe for tonight, which is going to be calm, ASMR, comics reading vibes. So before I get started reading my first zine, I want to show you a couple of images in case you have never played Stardew Valley or Animal Crossing. I mentioned these two games in the zine, and I'll give a little bit of history while I'm talking about it too. But basically, Stardew Valley is this farming sandbox game that has a combination of micromanaging gameplay, but also aesthetic and story-driven gameplay. And Animal Crossing is a similar game in that there are villagers you can interact with and tasks you can do every day. But there isn't really a linear storyline in Animal Crossing so much as there are real-time events that get updated according to the time on your game console. So there's a little bit of background info. And another thing you should know about these games, if you haven't played them, is that they're highly addictive. So be careful, but they're very soothing, very comforting games. So the first comic that I'm reading is called Flowers Look Like Weeds. It was shortlisted for the Broken Pencil Zine Awards, which I'm really stoked about. I made this comic in March, and it is a perzine about the two games that I've just mentioned, Stardew Valley and Animal Crossing. So for this zine, I just wanted to make something really plainly written in paste. So each page of the zine is a new panel, which is perfect for the slideshow sort of organization. And all of the illustrations are black and white, pencil and paper, with like soft graphite shading. And it's a little bit sad, but I do hope you like it. I'll just be describing each panel, like the images in each panel, and also reading the text. So in the foreground of this image, a little Stardew Valley figure is wearing a straw hat, carrying a huge hazelnut across the field, stomping as she goes. In the background, there's a barn with some firewood, some chests, and someone watering crops. If you play Stardew Valley, this will be a familiar scene to you. It's the place you spend most time in and the most work on. It's your farm. The text reads, "Yesterday I was playing Stardew Valley with my friend. It is my favorite game." The text continues, "Probably because it gets me nostalgic for that one summer in high school. I would lose track of time and just play all day. Helping neighbors, feeding chickens, harvesting fruit." The figure here in this image has changed appearance. Her straw hat is gone and she's wearing a bow with lighter long hair instead. She's holding a spiceberry rather than a hazelnut as she walks closer to the barn. There are no crops or any other players in the background anymore. So in Stardew Valley, there are different items you can forage. So not only hazelnuts and spiceberries, but in the winter, you can also find crocuses to pick. I wish that was true in real life. All you get during the winter in Toronto is street sludge. So here, there are two hands gently cradling a crocus that's resting on the snow, probably about to pick it up. And the text reads, "You are the one who first showed it to me on your computer at your place in Scarborough. You said I would love it. I thought it was dumb. But when I gave it another try at home, I quickly became addicted. That summer was the happiest I've ever been." This pencil drawing looks a bit like it's framed as an Animal Crossing screenshot since the time at the bottom reads 12 a.m. In Animal Crossing, they tell you the time in game because it's relevant to some of the mechanics. It's dark outside in this panel, and there's a river with craggly rocks flowing across the image. An Animal Crossing avatar with a short bob is fishing in the dark river, and it looks like a fish is about to bite the hook. The avatar's head is reflected in the water, but her eyes and mouth are obscured. The text reads, "After we finished our game, my friend insisted I play the new Animal Crossing. He said it would be better than Stardew, but I don't think that's true. For one, it's much pricier, and the gameplay just doesn't feel the same. But half of my friends list was online, playing Animal Crossing right when it was released at midnight." For the first time, we see someone who isn't an in-game avatar. She's a girl with short black hair lying beneath her blankets using her Nintendo Switch, which partially covers her face. It's dark, but the glow of the screen is illuminating her. The text reads, "I played a bit then too, so I went to bed late that night. I couldn't sleep. I missed you. I wanted to touch a warm back." So here there are two figures, one in the foreground and one closer to the midground using a laptop. The lighting is dim and we can't really make out any specifics of the appearance of the midground figure. The foreground figure looks like a girl with short, dark hair. In the room, there's also two beds, a rug, and a window looking out into the night. The text reads, "I had a dream we were hanging out somewhere that looked like my room. It got dark outside, and so we agreed that you should stay the night. This is a close-up of someone's body. They're wearing a striped t-shirt, lying down on a bed, one arm over two pillows and another arm patting an empty space on the bed beside their torso. The face is cut out of the picture plane. The text reads, "There were two beds in the room, but you went to mine, laid down like you always did, like you couldn't bear the weight of air for one more second, and beckoned to me, patting an empty sliver of mattress, arms outstretched." The vacant area on the bed is now being occupied by the girl. The other figure has their arm over her body. Her expression seems calm and vacant. The text reads, "I knew I shouldn't have, but I curled up with you. You put your arm around me. You put your arm over me." This image is slightly closer up to the girl. Her expression is changing as she looks up slightly. The text reads, "It felt good, it felt so warm, but I knew that it was wrong. I felt wrong." The text continues, "Then it began to feel bad, very bad, and I started to cry." The girl is now up from the bed. She's crying and putting her hand to her face. The figure in the background has his arms opened. The rest of his body is obscured. The girl is now underneath the covers alone. She's covering her face, rubbing her eye, and a stream of light is falling onto her face from a crack in the door. Two figures are silhouetted in the light of the doorway. The text reads, "You noticed and left to go talk to my parents in the other room. You had typically hated talking to my parents. I couldn't tell if you were pretending. Everyone was being very polite. I hid in the dark bed and couldn't stop crying hard. This is a problem I have in real life too, as you've told me before." This image mirrors the previous image with the girl in the bed covering her face. However, here we have a character that looks more like an Animal Crossing avatar, so her hands are simplified into spheres. It's brighter outside and we can see one of her eyes peeking out. The text reads, "When I woke up this morning, I was surprised my cheeks were so dry. My eyes hurt. With all this staying in, they've adjusted to only looking up close. Phone screens, book pages, monitors, sheets of paper, canvas. I opened up my island on Animal Crossing. I got 2 new friend requests." Here we see the landscape of a sunny Animal Crossing campsite. There's a big tent with a mailbox out front, and the character avatar is running underneath a tree with 3 fruits. There are butterflies all around and tall, dense patches of foliage. The text reads, "I put my tent next to a big patch of flowers, which I later discovered were actually weeds. But they looked so pretty. How was I supposed to know? The world of Animal Crossing is so tactile. The dirt is soft, the water is gentle. Everything is round and bright." Now the character avatar is running between 2 bubbly fruit trees. There are 3 of them in total, identical and lined up in a row. There are sticks on the ground, bugs hanging from a tree, and a balloon flying by with a present attached to it. The text reads, "Animal Crossing is a series featuring 5 games and 3 spin-off games. It's developed by Nintendo, a huge video game company with around 6,000 employees as of 2020. Now the character has changed appearance into the Stardew Valley avatar with a straw hat. The trees are now identical maple trees instead, and the avatar has reached the last tree. Petals are blowing through the sky. The text reads, "Stardew Valley originated as a little fan game improving on Harvest Moon, which was developed for the Super Nintendo console years and years ago. Stardew Valley was created by one person over the course of 4 years, Eric Barone, aka Concerned Ape. It released in 2016, the year we started dating." This is a brightly washed out drawing of someone in the foreground staring at a dark figure in the midground. He is silhouetted against the light environment, sitting at a desk and looking into a computer screen. The text reads, "I read this article about Barone that said his girlfriend was supporting him all by herself, financially, the entire time. He admitted he neglected her. He ignored everything around him to make the game absolutely perfect. It's so funny, isn't it? Everything about that game makes me feel warm and less alone, as warm as I did that summer 4 years before we broke up. This image mirrors the composition of the last one, but this time the colors are inverted. There's nobody in the foreground, just the figure at the desk at the computer. The figure on the screen are white spots against a very dark room. It feels quite empty. The text reads, I like how that game makes you feel like you can take your time. You can do things your own way. It gives you a little control. And yet, I wonder how lonely his girlfriend felt for those 4 years. She begged him to release the game, regardless of whether it was perfect. Did she resent him for selfishly following his dream at her expense? The perspective of this picture is drawn like a Stardew Valley screenshot. This time, the avatar has lighter, long hair and a bow on her head. She's about to board the bus. It's dark outside, and the moon is bright and full. The rest of the road is completely empty. The text reads, maybe I should have spent more of that summer spending time with you instead of playing that game, but maybe not. I just love it so much, even though it's really just a remake of an original. I can feel that it was someone's dream. In this image, a girl is slumped over and leaning her head against a bus window. The road outside is dark and empty with a single street lamp. We can't quite see her face, but her reflection in the window looks like the face of a Stardew Valley character. The text reads, a multiplayer update came out 2 years ago, but we didn't play much together. I can't even ride the TTC through East York or Don Mills or Wexford without thinking of you. I can't eat a hot shawarma or falafel without succumbing to a fit of nostalgia. It's bright outside now, and the girl is walking straight ahead on a sidewalk. We have a slight bird's eye view, so we can see a wire fence and a house to the left of the figure and a road on the right. The figure's expression remains in shadow, her head is downcast. The text reads, I took a walk in my neighborhood today, almost scared to go outside with what's going on right now. But I needed the fresh air and some distance around my eyes. I can't even look at a street lamp or sidewalk crack in my neighborhood without conjuring up your ghost by mistake. This image follows the same angle, but we're back in the Animal Crossing landscape. The avatar is being stung and chased down by a nest of wasps through a forest of fruit trees. She's running to escape, but her left eye is already swollen and her expression looks distressed. The text reads, it's not even that you left, really. We're still friends now and we talk. But I can't stand being haunted by these bootleg copies of you. These pieces of dreams reminding me of what I've done, pitching tents in corners of my mind, refusing to evacuate. This image again follows the same slightly overhead angle with the centered straight-on avatar, but in the skull cavern of Stardew Valley. It's the most dangerous area to be in. The ground is cracked, dry soil, and 2 serpent monsters are encircling the avatar. A health and energy bar shows that she's about to run out of both. She's sitting on the ground in anguish. The text reads, then again, maybe the version of you I know now is also just a copy of somebody I once knew better, saying, what we had wasn't perfect, but it was okay. Wasn't that enough for you? And that's the end of the comic. I hope you liked it. Yeah, I actually have one more short comic to read for you today. And then after that, I'll get to speaking a little bit more about my artistic statement and about my process. Mm. So I thought I'd read this one shot that was supposed to be published in Call Out Comics and distributed at TCAF. So Call Out Comics is a free newspaper of collected comics organized by my friend Jonathan Botstein, and it's very lovely and spunky and comes out once a year. This year, though, obviously TCAF got canceled, and so I thought I would just share this to maybe also lighten the mood. And as just a forewarning that alcohol is heavily involved in this comic for any folks who might be sensitive to that kind of thing. So with that being said, I will get started. It's a very loosely autobiographical comic, much like my other work, and it's drawn entirely in black ballpoint. So the first panel is a girl holding a wine glass loosely with a big drunk smile on her face. She's saying, anyway, that's why I hate artists and men. The people she's talking to are kind of annoyed and they're being pushed off the panel, but she keeps talking in little comments like, they suck, I have trauma. They're just like, okay, that's nice. Maybe trying to like leave or something. And the girl explains herself because they're so boring and not talented and they both talk way too much. But she gets cut off by the size of the panel. So in this next narrow panel, she's taking a swig of wine, which leaks out of her mouth. The sound effect says gulp. Meanwhile, she's thinking, cis man artist? And looks a little confused, like that phrase doesn't compute. And a bunch of little icons line the bottom, including a man with a mustache and a beret, question marks, a paintbrush, and a palette. Then all the color evaporates from her body and she spills a little wine as she shudders dramatically. Like, no, I don't want to think about that. Then she sort of just looks straight ahead with a blank expression. There are no people around in this panel, just an empty darkness. Now she's thinking, don't even get me started on white people or straights in brackets. I'm not sure if that really counts as a panel. It's just sort of a tiny drawing hidden behind this larger explosive panel where she begins shaking her head. She's yelling, ah, being a minority has poisoned my brain and made me an unfun person. The sound effect says shake, shake, shake. Not sure if that's actually a real sound that you can imagine, but please feel free to try. In the next panel, we see the glass of wine from her own perspective. Her left hand is wrapped around it, and in the glass, we can see her reflection rippling over the alcohol. She's stating in a fragile voice, wow, wait, no, I literally think I'm just a bad person. Two panels follow this one that look the same, like the same drawing layered underneath, but the line work gets more fragile and the alcohol in the glass is diminishing, so we can no longer see her face in it. There's little scratched out text in the margin that reads, I'm just a bad person. In the next panel, we see a shot of where she is in the environment. Her elbow is propping her head up on a bar table. She's sitting on a stool wearing boots and still gazing into the wine glass. She's thinking, why do adults love alcohol so much? In the margins underneath the table, we can still see a little scratched out text reading, what if, and I'm just a bad person. This panel is a close-up of her face. She's continuing to think, it's such an unsexy drug. Then continues in the next panel, makes everyone so stupid. Everyone's so stupid. She's looking behind her into the party or event or whatever's going on behind her. People are chattering and enjoying themselves, but her eyes are closed and tired. Her hair is a mess. The next panel is a bunch of scribbles that kind of looks like the crowd at the party. People are having indistinguishable conversation. I guess this is a slice of the event from her perspective. It's quite dark and there are bits of scratched out text around that repeat, what if, what if, what if. In the second last panel, she's looking back on the crowd again. We can't see her face. And this time there's not much shading at all, but the panel borders are dark and chunky. She's thinking, I'm so stupid. Then she realizes in the last panel, I'm an adult? While her face turns to us slightly and the party behind her is nothing more than a few sparse scribbles. The end. So now I'd like to give a super brief bit of background about what I was trying to do with these two comics and sort of contextualize them within my practice. So I find that most of the time my comics stem from personal experience with varying degrees of exaggeration and fictionalization. It's quite therapeutic for me to make work like this, and it can be challenging at times too, in a way that I like. So I know that my work can be a little sentimental as well. So within the first comic, Flowers Look Like Weeds, I was experimenting with leaning into that rhythm, being a little more naive and simple, like a children's book. I didn't use panels and left the edges sort of fuzzy and also made every panel the same rectangular size to give the effect of like vignettes or fragments of fuzzy memories rather than a true retelling of events. And I picked the rectangular format for all of the panels because, I mean, they recall kind of like a game screenshot, but also I knew that I wanted the physical comic to be printed at some point. So I knew that that format would fit nicely in a mini zine and could also give me flexibility with the text. So sometimes I put the text at the top, sometimes at the bottom, sometimes both, and that kind of allowed me to control the pace of the comic. In terms of the second comic, that was kind of just a satirical exploration of the shame and anxiety of becoming an adult. I think a lot of my comic work, both fiction and nonfiction, is about this topic to varying degrees of seriousness. And I'm definitely interested in the confessional tone and blurring reality with additions that I've invented or exaggerated. So I'll talk about this a little more when I get to the process, but something I find really fun and engaging is not planning out the panel layouts at all and sort of just mapping out the next panel as I go. And that's what I did for the second comic. And I find that it provides a really fluid energy that I like. Oh, there we go. I also wanted to share some of the people whose work inspired me as well. So Suvankam Thanavongsa is a writer, and her poetry and prose use really plain, naive language to make super devastating work, which I love. Carta Munir is a zinester from the US, and she runs a publisher called Diskette Press. She integrates technology and mechanical production into her work in really beautiful ways, and her work is also super personal, and she's really good at incorporating and combining those themes in her comics. Also really inspired by video game and fan culture in Toronto. Bit Bazaar is a festival that takes place at Toronto Media Arts Festival annually. Sorry, Toronto Media Arts Center annually, and combines comics and games into one big festival. Similarly, Comics X Games is a section at TCAF run by the Hand-Eye Society, and I love this relationship between the two mediums because I feel like they inform each other really well. And I definitely want to do more comics about games and games inspired by comics. The second list that I've included are just a list of other artists who do autobiography comics that I've read before. So they've definitely influenced my own work. I find them really engaging because it's kind of like that little rush you get when you watch really bad reality TV. Not saying that these people have really bad work, but it's like that rush of like, oh, I'm looking into your life. But in this case, it's kind of like they're letting you into their life and they're like kind of letting you take that voyeuristic peek. It's like an adrenaline rush. It's amazing. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about my process. And I have a lot of different processes for working. But I thought giving a little overview of the approach and the decision making involved might be helpful. So unfortunately, I didn't have access to my sketchbooks at the time of making this presentation, but if I'm going to be honest, there's not much in there to show anyway, because I am possibly one of the laziest workers when it comes to making comics. So let me explain what I mean by that. The first thing you need to do, in my opinion, if you're making a comic, is to put yourself in a good position to actually work on it, regardless of the idea. So no matter what I make, this is always what I start. So if the conditions are optimal, you'll be more likely to finish your project. And finishing a comics project is very hard. And the reason why it's so hard is because one illustration takes a long time, and one page of a comic might have 10 illustrations on it easily. And that is a lot of time to be spending and a quick path to getting burnt out as well. So first, I would say consider what you want to write or draw about and consider whether it's something you really actually want to talk about, which sounds obvious and self-evident, but there have been many situations where I started something and I was like, I don't care about this actually, what am I doing? And for scope, this is kind of related. Ask yourself, how long can I talk about this thing for? Like, how short or long can I extend this story to? So for example, one-shots like the second comic I read, just like one-page one-offs, are really great for little ideas and moments. And zines are also great because they prevent you from planning like a 50-page epic, because how are you going to print that? They set like a more reachable goal, I find. And I feel like with a zine, the end is always in sight whenever you want it to be. And that can be a very supportive and comforting framework. So with all this in mind, this is what you need to plan your workflow. So maybe think about whether you need to have any prior research, whether you need to write or draw anything in advance so the actual drawing can become a smooth process. So the main thing about my comics process is that I will never draw anything fully realized more than once. I hate penciling and inking. I hate making detailed storyboards because I know I'm going to get bored because I end up just being like, oh my God, I already drew this. I have to do it again. But that's just me. If what keeps you engaged involves really focusing on detail and drawing over and over again, then do that instead. Or if you feel really comfortable spending a lot of time storyboarding so that you can get your line work really done really quickly, you should do that instead. So for work where the wording is complicated or I feel like it's important to get just right, I'll create a loose script that can be adapted or modified when I actually generate my comic. So that's the image that I have on the left there. If the panel layouts are really tight or intricate, I'll also do like a really loose storyboard just so I know how large my figures should be with no text. They're basically incoherent to anyone except for me, and an example of this can be found on the right. This is what a panel might look like in this phase of planning. But there are also some scenarios, like the second comic I read, where I'll start drawing right on the page. And if I want the image to look more refined, I'll use pencil so that I can basically draw faintly and then build up detail as I go, erase as I go, and solidify the drawings. So the image on the left is an example of a comic that was built this way. If I don't mind giving them a scrappier look though, I might just go straight in with pen, like in the image on the right. And this is how the second comic that I read was created, just pen to paper. And this brings me to my next step for you, which is just to start drawing it now that you have your battle plan prepared. So do whatever it takes to stay engaged, but at the same time, if you take a critical step back and don't think the project is working, don't be afraid to just let it go. Like if it's making your life miserable, it's okay to say no. Like I've had a few instances where I've been drawing something and I thought, what is the image text interplay really adding to this? Like that's the strong suit of comics, but I'm not really using that feature at all. So I'll stop drawing it and just like fucking write an essay or something instead. Like sometimes it wasn't meant to be, but I find that no matter what happens to the project at the end, I'll have always learned something from trying, you know? So once you're done, you can put it together and publish it. You can distribute it digitally or physically, independently, or as a larger part of another publication or something. So for me, this part is fun because all the difficult decisions are already made and you can just play with putting your work in different contexts. And if you have any questions about any of these platforms or about distribution or anything, feel free to ask. I am by no means an expert, but I have done a lot of self-publishing. So yeah, that's the end of my reading and presentation. Thanks so much for everyone who dropped by to listen today. I am happy to answer any questions you might have. Let me just stop recording. Stop presenting. There we go. Okay, this is my first time doing a Zoom webinar, so. Cleo says, no questions, just big love for such a beautiful comic. Love your work, Lena. Thank you, Cleo. Your work is also a huge inspiration to me. Cleo has been also in the zine scene for such a long time, and their work is sick. Anonymous attendee says, many games feature comics in lieu of cutscenes, comics-like styles, or have background developed in parallel comics. Many comics include games, game-like styles, and many interesting gaming influences. Can you expand on the relationship between games and comics and what you feel about their interactions as mediums? Ooh, that's a really interesting question. I think formally, there's a connection between comics and games in that, at least to me, when I experience them, it's like the reader or the player can spend as much time as they want within them. And I know that depends, like, depending on the game and stuff, but it's almost like you can go back to other panels and you can kind of like control the pace and explore and interact at your own pace. And I find that really appealing, and kind of like an interesting way to involve the reader of your work. Also, like many people, this is a less formal answer, but like many people, one of my first introductions to comics was Scott Pilgrim, and Scott Pilgrim is like the epitome of Toronto games, comics, kind of like combinations. And that was also just like really a lot of fun. it was just a lot of fun to read. I still love Scott Pilgrim. I'll say it right now. Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry if that did not answer your question, but that is the thing that I would say is similar between comics and games. Marta says, love you, Lena. Love you too. How do you choose which method to use for each project? It depends. I think, like I said before about longevity, sometimes I'll think of like a stupid idea and then just decide to draw it. But if it's something that I've been like ruminating about for a really long time and it's not just like immediate catharsis, like it's something that I know that I want to research more and like actually explore intellectually further, then that's definitely something that I might take more care into planning and stuff. But if I have just like a cute idea for like a scene or something really goofy, then usually I will freestyle it. Yeah, I think that's a good answer. Does anyone else have any other questions? I will give it a bit, but or if you have any questions for Rotem, I'm sure they would love to also answer your questions about the comics library in Toronto. Oh, Cleo asks, can I ask about Hell Baby Volume 2 blush emoji? Hell Baby canceled by COVID. No. I mean, kind of a little bit, but also, I don't know if I want to do like long format Hell Baby comics anymore. I find that they work really well for like shorter adaptations of like smaller stories and stuff. So I might do like a collection of shorter stories with Hell Baby and then put them together into a second volume. I'm not really sure how I want to approach it yet. Right now I'm also working on my newsletter a lot, which has comics in it sometimes. So right now that's my Hell Baby. That's my version of Hell Baby. Okay, Marta asks again. What is better, Animal Crossing or Stardew Valley? Stardew Valley is still better than Animal Crossing. I'm sorry, Animal Crossing stands. You heard it from me first. I feel like the storyline in Stardew Valley is more in depth. There's like, yeah, there's like such a rich and deep cast of characters in Stardew Valley, and like, I think it's cool that one guy made it. I think it's cool that he made it. That's like really punk rock. That was my final answer. If no one else has any other questions, Rotem, I think that we can end it, but maybe I'll just give a few more minutes. Oh, Cleo says, I love your newsletter and will happily wait for Hell Baby collection. What is your top 5 favorite video game lists? Okay, I love these questions that people are bringing to the table. Top 5. Okay, one thing you also have to know is that I'm really bad at video games. So even though I can appreciate like the art of some of them, or like looking over people's shoulders as they play, my hand-eye coordination and reflexes are really bad. So that prevents me from enjoying a lot of games. Stardew Valley is definitely near the top. Super Smash Brothers Ultimate is my guilty pleasure game. I also love playing Mahjong Solitaire. It's not real Mahjong because it's literally just matching, but I find it a very comforting game to play. What other video games have I played that I like? Oh, I had a really big JRPG phase, which I feel like also influenced my comics a lot. And I played games like, oh man, I don't even remember the titles of them, but they were just like these scrappy little indie games that people made in like RPG Maker 2003, and those were like my introduction to video games, and I really loved those a lot. So I think those are my top games. Also, my friend tells me that Gone Home is really good, but I can't play that game without getting motion sickness. Shout out to Collie. She thinks Gone Home is great. So if any of you guys like video games, you should play that. Oh, and Return of the Obra Dinn. Okay, that's my list.
Hey, Lena. I was just wondering, I don't know how to ask a question as a host in the Q&A, but I had 2 questions for you. Just
Sure.
for those who might be watching either right now or on YouTube later, can you talk about Hell Baby a little bit more?
Sure.
Just to, describe that work a little bit more. And then Jordan asked this really great question last event for Old Growth Press, and I just wanted to ask you as well,
Sure.
which is, I don't know how he phrased it exactly, but it was kind of what do you like about comics, or why do you work within comics and spend time tell stories through the comics medium in particular, which might overlap a little bit with the earlier question, but yeah, just wondering about that.
Whew. All right, so I'll answer your first question first. So Hell Baby is like a comic that I made that's kind of like what I was talking about before, about like blending my personal experiences with like fictionalized exaggerations. And it was like a fun zine that I did about art school. I'm currently in my final year of art school, so Hell Baby's days are already numbered. But I found it really fun to like mix the sort of like digital avatar aesthetic with kind of like the almost game like having to navigate art school, kind of like having to navigate these weird barriers and like friendships and stuff. So yeah, I guess I use the internet a lot in my work, which I didn't really think about before this talk, to be honest. And the reason why I like comics so much is because I really love writing and I also love drawing. And sometimes I feel like drawings can't express what words can express, and words can't express what drawings can express. So I'm like, if we combine the two, that's the best, because then you can like, there's no frustration with not being able to like write something down if you want to write it down. I think that's just like a natural way for a lot of people to express themselves. And I find that like kids really love comics a lot too. Like that's something that comes naturally to kids, is kind of like reading comics, or sorry, like reading text and reading images at the same time. And kind of like that flow of reading is something that kids really enjoy, which I'm also super interested in, because it feels like a lot of people grow up and then it's kind of hard to get back into like reading text and then images at the same time. But I think that it's like a really expressive format and that everybody should try it.
That's great. I think if there's no other questions, we can end it now. That was lovely. Thank you so much for your reading, and yeah.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone who came.
Okay, bye everyone.
Bye bye.